Get Warrior Tough, Mental Training 101 with Andrew Whitman on 105.5 The Roar. Back to Andrew Whitman.
All right, back in the saddle. I love it. What's up, Steve?
Feeling good. How about you?
Yeah, man, I'm enjoying this time with Colonel Folchetti. And I tell my kids this all the time. Whenever I hear him talk, it's like a warm blanket.
I enjoy it. Hey, Colonel, I got a question for you. And, this is from me. I'm from a non-military background. But when obviously you've got a very extensive and decorated background in the Marine Corps. What got you to originally decide to go into the Marine Corps? And talk a little bit for me and our listeners that maybe don't have that, but talk about how you got into it and then what it did to really change your life, because you've got some impressive background that I really want the listeners to latch on to.
That's a really funny story, Steve, because when I was a kid, one of my favorite books, a teenager, and into my college years, one of my favorite books was a story called God is My Co-Pilot by a fellow named Robert F. Scott.
Great book.
And he had been a Flying Tiger pilot with Claire Chennault during World War II. And I read that book over and over and over again. And one day I was walking through the campus center, and the Marine officer selection officer was there, and I knew that the Navy had two-seaters, but obviously the old Mustang and the Flying Tigers was single-seat airplanes. And I asked the Marine Corps, "Do you guys have single-seat jets?" And he said, "Yeah, we still fly the A4 Skyhawk." I said, "I want to go." And he said, "So, well, in order to be a pilot, you've got to take all of these tests, right? You got to take this air, visual, spatial relationship thing, and your eyesight's got to be 20/20. So, a week later, I showed up down at the station, and they gave me the test, and I failed it miserably. The whole spatial relation thing, couldn't get it, and my eyesight was just a shade under 20/20. He said, "Well, you can't be a pilot, but if you go to OCS, you get a choice. Unlike going to boot camp, you don't necessarily have to go. When you come back to college." I said, "Well, hell, I'll give it a whirl anyway, because I like the way all the obstacle courses and all that stuff looked, and I thought it would be a pretty good check." And my dad had been a Marine in Korea, and so I went to OCS and got sold right there, and that's what made me decide to stay. And we had talked offline about books, and one of my favorite books that I always asked all my Marines to read was Fields of Fire by Jim Webb. And I read that book at the end of OCS and decided that what I wanted to do was lead other men in combat. And so that's how I became a Marine grunt.
Dude, I just got chill bumps, man, because you're so good at it.
That is awesome.
I got to tell you, and I was saying this to my kids after the last time we spoke, and they're like, you guys sound exactly alike. Like, you say the same things. And I said, yeah. And I said, and the reason that, it's comfort to me. It is like a warm blanket or a security blanket, is because we were in Panama, we were in Honduras, we were in Desert Storm, and no matter what was going on or what the stressors were, if I could hear your voice, I knew everything would be okay. And
that's an enormous compliment, Drew, and I appreciate it tremendously. It is honestly the single greatest privilege that I was ever granted was Uncle Sam's willingness to allow me to do that. And obviously there were a lot of people along the line who mentored me and taught me how to do it to the best of my ability. And the Lord gave me something that allowed me to be successful in that arena. But it's amazing. We had our fundraiser yesterday, and there's an enormous volume of Marines around here, and a lot of them belong to some chapter or other of the Leathernecks Motorcycle Club.
Nice.
And one of those chapters back in July had run a fundraiser, and we had convinced them to contribute part of their one of the things that they would donate to would be the Semper Fi Odyssey. And so, here we are in this little general store across the road from a high school, and this thing is just swamped with bikers, right, from the Leatherneck clubs, from multiple chapters around here. And, you see guys, right? There's old guys and young guys. There's kids that have been in this fight, and there's old guys that were in Vietnam and guys that were in between. and the commonality that we share as Marines is nothing less than stunning, because there's guys in these clubs that are 21, 22, and there's guys in these clubs that are, in my age, in their late 50s or early 60s, and yet you'd think we're all still in a squad base someplace, just standing around telling exactly the same jokes and breaking each other's horns in exactly the same fashion as happened, however many years ago it happened to be. It's amazing.
It really is cool, and wow. It is an amazing. I'll say it's transgenerational. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Umphlett has it. I'm not sure that he originated this saying or not, but what he does is he calls it a cult.
He does say that. I heard him say it like 3 times when we were together.
And it's really hysterical, because when you drive around, it doesn't make any difference where you are in the country. You'll find a cult member flying his colors underneath the red, white, and blue, and you won't find any other branch of the service up or down that road or any other road flying their colors. And every time we drive by one, now he's got my father saying it, because my dad was a Marine. I think I said that in Korea.
Right.
He drives by, we'll be going someplace. He goes, yeah, there's a cult member over there.
Because they're flying the Marine Corps flag underneath the Old Glory. Yeah, you're right. I mean, when he said that, I was just like, yeah, it is what it is, man. I mean, I guess we're kind of half nuts. We were talking about the books, and now Steve has wrote down the 2 that you got. He got as my pilot, those. And then the Jim Webb book. You put us on a professional reading development list. Could you kind of give our listeners like your top 3 or 5, to professionally develop?
Well, I think for your listeners, I think a really good one, the 2 really good ones, and they're both pretty light reads, is A Message to Garcia by a guy named Hubbard. I think it was Albert Hubbard, and that's a really old story. It's just a little short thing. And another one is Battle Leadership by a German fellow named Adolf von Schell, and he was a German colonel during the First World War. And there's The Message to Garcia is kind of a short deal, and in a very brief terms, it's about a guy who spends 8 or 9 months delivering a message that ultimately didn't need to be delivered, but he did it despite all of the travails and hardships that he had to do, because he was given a mission and he accomplished it. And that's really the takeaway. And von Schell talks a lot about, but my favorite story out of that book is he had to deliver an order, and he had 3 different battalion commanders that he had to deliver it to. And all 3 of them had different personalities. So he had to deliver it in different fashion to each one of them. It's the same order, right? And you've listened to me deliver hundreds, you've heard hundreds of operations orders, and everybody follows the 5-paragraph order sequence.
Right.
But this guy's point was that one guy was such an egotist that he had to be convinced he was the point of main effort, even though he wasn't. Okay, and the other guy was such a perfectionist that he had to be, given tasks that he could accomplish to his sense of perfection. So the takeaway from that was that if you can't deal with people, and it doesn't make any difference whether you're leading a combat command or whether you're running an organization or you're in a junior leadership position in some organization, if you don't understand people or you refuse to understand people, there's no way you can possibly succeed. And that's all the rest of it. You could throw the rest of that book away, except for probably that one chapter. And go someplace, any place, and be a success if you learn that. Fields of Fire by Webb is a great story by Jim Webb is a great leadership story. Killer Angels is another. I think the biggest Killer Angels is about the Battle of Gettysburg, written by Michael Shara, and after he died, his kid wrote a whole bevy of other stories about the Civil War and about the Revolution. He's got an pretty impressive bibliography behind him. But the takeaway in Killer Angels is just the agony of the separation that occurred between the North and the South. And if you don't have an understanding that your decisions shape your life, and where you are today is a function of all the decisions that you've made in the past.
Wow.
And the book really illustrates it if you pay attention, not to the battle scenes, but to the conversations that happen between between the people who were in that book is really pretty enlightening.
I want to extend on that. I like what you just said, and that, we Andrew and I talk a lot and we do a lot of shows together, but you're right. Every single one of us who's listening to this show today, we're all where we are because of the decisions we've made. Transition that in, Colonel, where, obviously we have listeners that come from various backgrounds and they say, well, I want to make better decisions and do things. Can you expand on that? Because you're right. We are where we are because of the things we've already done, and we want to all get better and do and achieve goals. Can you maybe expand on that a little bit about making better decisions?
You can look at where you are, and some folks will bemoan it, I've got my oldest son he's a very successful police officer right now, but he's got a line of automobile problems and accidents that are longer than both of my arms put together. Okay, and my wife was always bemoaning that he has bad luck, and I always said, it ain't bad luck. It's that he puts himself in bad positions. He drives to the wrong places at the wrong time of day, and so your ability to capitalize, even if you've made a series of bad decisions, or I'm not saying I make good decisions every day of the week either, but if you look at them and recognize them as bad decisions, then that's a starting point for moving forward. And then recognizing that bad decision led to this bad thing. So how do I correct that? Well, you go back and revisit that decision, and the next time you're presented with that identical opportunity, you go in a different direction.
Right? Yeah. Course correction 101.
Yeah.
That's so great.
And because good ones, when you can look at good decisions too, and say, okay, that one led to a positive result. So the next time I have an opportunity that looks like that, then I'll take that opportunity, right? So that you can build on good decisions as well as you can correct off of bad ones. You just have to recognize them as good and bad.
Right, and then the thing is doing the after action report, whether it was good or bad. Always take a look at what just happened. What did I like? What could I do different? And a lot of folks don't. Take
there's a this may help a little bit too, Steve. There was an Air Force officer who taught at the Air Force Academy whose name eludes me right now, but he came up with a process that he referred to as the OODA loop. OODA. It's an acronym, and it stands for Orient, Observe, Decide, and Act. Right, and that's what we do. We do it. We can do it consciously, but more often, or at least as often, we do it unconsciously. We see something, right? We orient ourselves on it. We observe it. We make a decision. All right, hey, there's my buddy. He's waving me down. The bar is right there across the road. Good, I'm going in there to have a beer with him. But that's an example of the OODA loop, right? And that can be a good decision or a bad decision. If it gets you a job, maybe it's a good decision. If it gets you a DWI, obviously it was a bad one. But we do it all the time. And if you start doing it consciously, then maybe you can get yourself into a better decision-making cycle.
That's awesome. Hey, thank you so much for giving us, a piece of your day, man. I really appreciate you coming.
It's been great. It's a pleasure, man. I like being on the radio. I like talking to you. It's been too long.
Yeah, and I'm going to kind of rope you into it. I know you already told me offline that you would be like a regular on the show, and we would do segments. We don't have to do long segments all the time, but whatever time we can get with you, again, I love the sound of your voice, man. It just makes me,
buddy. I just hope it helps you. I just hope it helps you out. That's all.
Thanks, Skipper. I appreciate
you. People like listening to it.
All right, boss. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Colonel.
All right, Pard. I'll talk to you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Steve, nice talking to you, buddy. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. It's a pleasure and an honor.
All right. Take care, guys.
A company that has happy employees will be more effective. A company that has employees that know how to deal with obstacles and problems will make more money. A company that gives their employees the tools to make those things happen is the company that turns to Andrew Whitman. Andrew has been teaching leadership, performance discipline, emotional intelligence, critical thinking, and mental toughness for